Good evening. My name is Adia Rogers, and my presentation will be on the topic of test bias, administration, and the research that supports my claim. The definition of test bias has had several meanings over the years, but for the purpose of this presentation, I would like to use the definition of test bias as the tendency of scores on a test to systematically overestimate or underestimate the true performance of individuals to whom that test is administered, particularly members of a specific race or group, particularly Black children. One of the rules in administration is that you can't give encouragement while administering a test. One of the rules in cognitive test administration, Wechsler's intelligence scale for children, is that the administrator or examiner cannot give encouragement to the student as that is felt to give a student an edge or lead them to believe that they are doing well. This rule does not take into consideration the challenges of Black children or the covert racism that they encounter. Black children or Black people, Black minorities, perform better when they are encouraged and motivated. There is an historical context for this to need validation, particularly during the slavery times. In today's classroom, the testing settings, the need for validation continues. Generally, the examiner is a white female who often lacks the natural connection to the Black race. So, there is already a level of discomfort coming into this test experience. When the test administrator is white or of different race of the child being tested, there may be already a feel of disconnect. When discomfort is present, some children may not perform to their best ability, meaning they will perform with lower scores or have test anxiety. This is why establishing a rapport / comfort should be as important as administrating the test. I will now move on to my own personal experience of experiencing test bias. As a fourth grade student in a predominantly white school setting, I've witnessed firsthand this form of test bias. Because I was shy, white teachers assumed that I had a speech disability. I was tested and I did not feel comfortable to the test giver. She did not smile nor make me feel comfortable while giving me the test. There were some answers I knew, but because of my discomfort, I chose not to say anything. I was later enrolled in the program for speech disability. As I look back on that experience, I now see that I was experiencing text anxiety due to my white examiner's lack of cultural sensitivity. I will now move on to the research that I have found on test bias and old research and old articles that support my claim. There is much to say about the effects of poor teaching and test results. Test scores are struggling to this day, often due to poor teaching. One instance of test bias was reported in the article An Investigation of Wechsler's Intelligence Scale for Children. This article challenges the notion of test questions in IQ tests. For example, the test item that asks, "Who discovered America?" The test developers gave credit to the answer, Christopher Columbus, when in reality, Native American people were already living in America. Technically, you cannot discover something where people are already living there and thriving in. Another example of test bias in a test question is, what is the thing to do when a person much smaller than yourself starts a fight with you? The correct answer is to walk away or not to strike back. The correct answer does not take into account cultural specifics of the African American experience. There was also a case filed in 1971, it's called the Larry P. case, that banned IQ testing in California for Black students for the purposes of special education placement. The Larry P. court case was filed in 1971 at the high school request of black psychologists and others who discovered that the state's special education classes were 27% Black, which was 3 times their proportion in the normal school population. As I conclude, there is a quote by Ibram X. Kendi, author of How to Raise an Anti-Racist, that says, "The tests have failed time and again to achieve their intended purposes, measuring intelligence and predicting future academic and professional success. The tests, not the Black test takers, have been underachieving." Here, this author, an educational expert, argues the implicit bias that creates tension between the test takers and students that can lead to distorted test results. My mother is a school psychologist with over 25 years of experience working with Milwaukee Public Schools, the same school district that I graduated from. She shared with me that she spends just as much time establishing rapport as she does testing the child. Building a child's confidence and trust are the foundation that increased test scores are built on. She added that she often asks culturally responsive questions about family customs and traditions, including hobbies, interests, and daily interactions. Hello, my name is Adia Rogers, and I will be continuing my presentation on test bias from Chapter 19. There have been many serious discussions concerning the significance of tests for the placement and classification of young individuals and older individuals from young age, elementary school to college. For the past many years, it's been many years that this research has been done. In this chapter, I learned that test bias has been an issue mainly with ethnic groups, particularly the African American group itself. Although test bias is undeniably essential, it is not the first source of debate in the field of mental testing. So it's not one of the main debates and main issues in mental health testing and school testing, but it's one of the most serious ones that needs to be addressed nowadays. After doing a whole lot of research and after reading this chapter, perhaps the most difficult societal issue that we face is inequality. We see that all around the world today. There just have been a lot of racial issues that have a lot to do with inequality, but we don't talk about it a lot in the school system. And I'm glad that I was able to get this chapter and this presentation to present, and I'm glad I was able to read it and gain more knowledge about it. But I've also learned that most individuals believe that academic attainment is a reflection of their characteristics, and I just don't really believe in that. And that's why test bias is such a major issue nowadays, because the questions that the teachers give or the psychologists give seem to be particularly for that main group. And and it always has a certain answer that they're looking for instead of just a correct answer. And particularly I will be focusing mainly on why test bias is so controversial. It's really because of how the difference in scores between African Americans and white Americans have been in the past 50, 60 years, going back to all the way to the 1970s, as long as it's been that long.